Okay, thank you very much, Katarina, for this opportunity to present this seminar. I believe this seminar will be more technical, but I hope that it will not be too boring, of course. The topic of today of my presentation is about strategic combination of Agile with other productivity frameworks. So let's move on. So I believe that the audience at this point knows something that are important to explore. First thing is to consider the social and environmental dimensions of innovation, not only from a business perspective, but also other components like, for example, social, environment, and realize that the innovation policies that are implementing in our organization has impact in other dimensions. Also important at this point, I believe, is the circular economy, the concept of circular economy that was addressed yesterday. Also yesterday was also addressed the concept of agile innovation. Agile innovation is a very important one to decrease the risk of market. And also at this point, I also believe that the audience knows, or I expect that they know, that it's important to have a responsible innovation approach. And here it is important to realize the difference between an approach and a framework. An approach is something that you can use, implement in daily activities. When I say a daily, I see from a personal point of view, but also from a business point of view. And a framework is a package of rules or guidelines that really must be adopted. I think, in my opinion, of course, it is more important to have a responsible innovation approach than a framework, even if a framework can help us in our process of innovation. This seminar will try to address three important topics. First one is to identify and characterize agile frameworks. There are a lot of agile frameworks. My idea is not to address all of them. My idea is to choose between 5, 6 frameworks, look briefly them, and also realize the potentialities to combine several agile frameworks. This is the second important point of this presentation, is the idea to create hybrid frameworks. And at last but not least, is the importance of scaling Agile. Scaling Agile, considering large-scale environments and not only small teams. So let's start by looking for Agile productivity frameworks. The idea is to present some of them. We'll start by Lean, after that Scrum, Kanban, Lean Startup, Design Thinking, and Growth Hacking. So let's move to the first one, that is Lean. Lean was initially created in the context of a multinational company located initially in Japan, Toyota, that is also called the Toyota Way. And there are two important concepts associated with the Lean approach. First one is continuous improvement, and the second is respect for people. And when you look to Lean, realize that there are some practices that are implemented in Lean. First one is a term in Japanese that is not easy to translate to Portuguese or to English, that is called Genshi Genbutsu. That idea is to go and see what is there. Go to the problem, go to where the problem is happening and see and realize what we can do to correct it. So it is important to go and see directly the problem. After that, emerge the concept of Kaizen, that is concept associated with continuous improvement. Also important is work in team, because Lean considers then isolatedly an activity, of course, can have impact in the system, but when we have really a a deep impact when you work in team, and of course, and considering the Japanese mindset, respect for people is very important in Lean. So, considering Lean, what is really important? Characteristics of Lean. First one is to identify value and map the value stream. So, it is important to realize all the phases of the system, map them, and identify where they are the value is creating. Also important is the concept of create flow. What is the idea of flow here? From two perspectives, from a business or industrial point of view, that is to know how the several activities are interconnected and how they create value, but also from a person point of view. I have been researching in this field in terms of positive psychology, and this is very important in Lean. It's the idea that people, when is engaged in some activity, lose the sense of time and lose the need of ego. What is very important to work in team, to create teamwork. Also very important in Lean is the concept of pull. So I will start to produce something, to create something based in the user needs. And the last one is central in Lean is continuous improvement. Continuous improvement of process along time. Now I would like to present Scrum. Scrum is a framework very popular, for example, in IT industry where I work also. Here, the starting point is not requirements. Typically, when in the IT industry, you start to code something, you start by identifying requirements. Here is not the way. The way is to consider user stories. User stories tells more about what user needs or user wants. So you write the things that you want to implement based in user stories, and you put them in the product backlog. After that, you can start your sprint. You start by your sprint planning, and you put the user stories that you want to implement during the sprint in your sprint backlog. Typically, a sprint has a duration of 2 or 1 week, typically not more than 1 month. After that, you start coding, developing things in your Scrum team. Scrum team is composed by the product owner, by Scrum Master, and of course the Scrum members that are the developers. You have daily Scrum to understand what is happening, how we can improve the process, and you have, of course, increments of your process that you are implementing. It is important at this point the process of sprint retrospective, that is the way how we operate in sprint, how we can improve it, but also the product backlog. Because after a sprint, you can add new user stories, and you can add new user stories to the next sprint, or you can place them in the product backlog. And the process is incremental along time. So what is really important in Scrum? First thing, very important, is to know that customers can and will change their minds. Customers, in fact, they don't know very well what they want. And of course, the requirements that they need or user stories that are better mapped in Scrum can change a long time. So I cannot manage in a predictive or planned way all the things that I want to implement. So it is accepted that all the problem, all the complexity cannot be designed totally. And the idea is to create something new and something really quickly, so I can validate it. And most important is to respond to new needs and to change that the user plays to team and to company. Other approach here is the Kanban. Kanban places all the activities like in a board, in this case a whiteboard. It places activities in different stages, like pending, announce, development, test, and deployment. And it is easy to realize the state of each activity. So it is really a very visual approach. So good things of Kanban. Kanban is very easy to realize all the work that I have to do and what I have done. Limit work in progress, not to do a lot of things at the same time. Measure and manage all the activities. The process policies are really explicit, and it is also easy to recognize improvement opportunities in Kanban. So Kanban is very used, for example, in industrial companies. Other framework is Lean Startup. Lean Startup starts by the ideas. After the ideas, it's important to implement it. So I code, I develop it, and I measure the data that I can extract from the Lean Startup process. And after that, I can learn with it and create new ideas based in this process. So looking to Lean Startup, what is important to know? It's important to start with a business idea that has typically more than an initial hypothesis to test what is better or it makes more sense to implement. It is important to build something quickly and cheaply that really gives the team the opportunity to learn and to improve the process. So I measure everything. So to know if the initial hypotheses are valid or not, and I improve the process along the way. For example, pivot, for new solutions, and create new hypotheses along the way. Another popular framework that's starting in the field of design is called design thinking. That was initially proposed by Stanford University in the United States. And it is composed of 5 steps. First one is empathize. That idea is to understand the problem. For example, involving the customers, involving the users. For example, using the interviews. After that, it is important to define the goals that you want, the challenge, the key points. And let's move to the next step, that is ideate. Ideate is a central point in design thinking. It is the process of share ideas, diverse, converge with your team, thinking what is better to implement, prioritize what really I need to implement first, and what I can implement later, and I will create prototypes. Prototypes is also a very central point in design thinking. So I create mock-ups, storyboards, something that can validate our ideas, and text quickly things, understand the impediments, and understand what is working well and what is not working well so good. And when I look to design thinking, they are essentially 4 rules very important to know. The human is a very important point because most part of frameworks that deal with Agile think from a technical point of view. And design thinking, no. Design thinking considers only the human. The human only considers the impact of social components. So it is very important. Also, another important rule that is not so easy to explain is the ambiguity. What is ambiguity? Typically, when someone talks about ambiguity, thinks that ambiguity is bad. However, ambiguity can be good at a certain level. Why? Because ambiguity gives us a space to experiment new things. So ambiguity is very important in design thinking. We design, so I see design thinking believes and considers that technology can be changed according to social context, and tangibility. Tangibility is the idea to create prototypes and validate our ideas. Last one framework that we'll talk about is growth hacking. Growth hacking has input from 3 disciplines: marketing, and psychology, data and experimentation, and high-tech and automation tools. So what considers growth hacking? Considers, in first place, rapid A/B experiments. A/B experiments are very popular in IT industry. It's the idea to create, for example, two interface A and B, test them and realize what is working better. Okay, so it is really a very interesting approach because it easy to compare. Also important is to continue focus on comparison improvement. It is tailored to the business type, so it can have KPIs per channel, and these KPIs make sense in your business type. And the last one is to include automatic tools like Google Analytics, Mixpanel, Kissmetrics in your process to measure if really you are going to have good results or not. So that was the list of frameworks that can be implemented. But at this point, it is important to make a small pause and look to this image. When the requirements are stable, traditional approach like waterfall approach works well. Okay, no problem with that. However, the big problem is that currently, nowadays, requirements can be changed. So the users don't know what they want to implement totally in the initial phase of the process. So you are adopting Agile. This is the case, for example, of university spin-offs, like companies that are operating in science parks. So high-tech companies, typically, these kind of companies look and like very much Agile. So it is common to see Agile paradigm implement in these companies. However, on another perspective, when you start to working and start to deal with large and big companies, you realize that they don't like so much Agile. They really implement Agile in some small teams, but really they don't implement Agile in all organizations, typically. So they still like the idea to use traditional approach that give more stability to your process. Typically, if you consider IT industry, to software development process. So they give to them more stability. However, in the middle appears something that may offer good results. That is the hybrid approach. Hybrid approach is something in the middle between Agile and traditional approach. Let's look to hybrid approach. So let's consider the vision of some big companies in the market. First one is Gartner. Gartner is a very big company, consulting company, and implements Agile in dividing it in three components. So to understand the customer problem, they use design thinking. So design thinking framework is used essentially to understand the customer problem. After that, when they want to try and test and measure the process, if they are giving good results or not, they implement the lean startup strategy. And after that, when they really want to implement something, they use, for example, Scrum. So that's the vision to combine three different frameworks. Another approach, in this case from CGA, that is the idea to combine several frameworks like design thinking, like lean, agile, and growth hacking in the process. And they consider here three different moments in time. So problem ideation, they use design thinking. So typically design thinking is used in the first steps of the process, typically to create new ideas. And when you start to have something to test, you move to other approach like lean that can implement it easily. and Agile, like, for example, Scrum. They can combine both. And when you are in the market and you want to groups, there are other techniques like groups hacking that is good to target customers to check if things, the metrics are really good or not. So they combine for different frameworks. So what are the good news or something that I really want to implement when I combine several frameworks? First thing is about semantic traps. What is the idea? Each framework has some key words, has some key concepts that are not easy to map when combined with other frameworks. So what is the idea? The idea here is to forget the names and the technical aspects of framework and start to thinking and looking to the goals of the framework. What is really important for framework? And when you look to the goals, you realize that they are essential to really implement different frameworks and combine them. Another important aspect is avoid complexity. I would say that when you combine different frameworks, you increase the complexity. Yes, but you need to avoid it. How to avoid the complexity? The idea is to focus only in the principles, only in the goals of each framework that really can add value to your process, okay? And not only adopt everything that you expect from each framework. The important is to maximize value created to the organization, and at the same time, you minimize time and waste also time and resource. And very important, and align with the previous seminar, is the question related with standardization. Look, first thing is simplicity. Simplicity is the opposite of complexity. So you need to ensure that your hybrid framework is simple to understand and simple to follow by your team. And at the same time, you look to standardization of process to guarantee that you can repeat the process in your, for example, in other teams, in other delegations, and to guarantee that you can repeat the process with success. Okay, that's really important. And the last topic of this seminar is about scaling Agile. Why it is important and why it is related with hybrid. Let's look about it. Typically, Agile is implemented in small teams, in small scale teams. Why it happens? Because the organizational culture is incompatible with Agile values. Yes, this is really an important issue that was also addressed in the last presentation, because large organizations really they don't like the idea to work in Agile and to give visibility to all the process. So there is, of course, resistance to change. Management support. Management support is an interesting issue. When you work at a small company, or at least in a high-tech company that is placed in a science park, you realize that management team and the development team is the same thing. Typically, managers are developers. When they are not, they are present. There is open space and everybody can communicate, and it is easy to talk with all people. It is not exactly the case of all companies. It's interesting because I started to work in Quimonda, that was the second biggest company in Portugal. And really, it was an interesting experience because management support from Quimonda, if you forget the idea of the management team in Porto, but management team in South Korea, it was really easy. It wasn't really easy to talk with management support. And something that I would like to validate, so needs time to get approbation. So it is really not easy to work in the very big companies. Also important is lack of skills and experience with agile methods. Because when you think about Agile, you say, oh, everybody knows Agile, it's easy to implement. Yes, it is true. It is true when you think about university context, for example, and science parks. But when you move to large companies, you realize that some people really don't know very well how to work with Agile. Okay? They have not a very good idea of Agile, and it is important to change this mindset. And another important thing is about inconsistent process and practice across teams. It's a very interesting point because, for example, Scrum, that I know very well, the way you work with Scrum in another organization can be different from other organizations, especially when you move to another context. For example, when you move to another country, when you move to another country that has another religion, for example. This happens, for example, in you start to work in Orient or something like that, or in Africa. So this creates different perspectives about frameworks, because frameworks are not implemented in the same way in all organizations. So let's move to the paradigm to scale Agile. You start by pre-large scale Agile. What this means? This means that you have a small-scale Agile implemented in small teams in your company with 2-3 teams adopting Agile. But when you want to implement in your organization, but you need to have a large-scale Agile team, you start to think about it. And your expectations start to grow. When you start to select large scales, you realize there are a lot of large scales in the market. And your expectation is very high. Your expectation is aligned that the large scale framework will resolve all issues and will be a good solution for your problems. And of course, when you have so good expectations, you start to implement it. And you start to implement large-scale Agile framework that are popular in the market. But when you start to implement, you start to realize one thing very important. It's a question of time. It's very important to look to time because the notion and concept of time is not exactly equal in all organizations. For example, in IT industry, waiting 6-9 months or 1 year for something, it's a lot of time. In my research activities, waiting 1-2 years, 3 years for publication, for example, is common. So no problem. Okay. So the notion of time is not exactly the same. And the company and the management of the company, the leaders of the company, start to thinking, oh, he's implementing a large-scale Agile framework, but he's taking a lot of time to do it. The results are not visible, and it is a waste of time and money. So they start to thinking like that. And they want to produce something that gives visibility. And when this happens, typically there are 2 options. First option is to abandon the large-scale Agile framework. Why? Because it will change your process in your company, and that's not good. Business team will not like that. And also another option is to create an hybrid approach. An hybrid approach can be really a good solution. Okay, so you start to have a hybrid approach, and you create your approach based in your needs. So it is very important to consider that. You should realize in the market and look into other companies, big companies, implementing large-scale Agile frameworks, realize that the success typically is in hybrid approach. When a company wants to implement a large-scale Agile framework, independently of your reality, of your organizational boundaries, typically the results are not good. So it is very important to consider a hybrid approach. So what is the contribution of Agile framework to responsible innovation? what really Agile frameworks can give to you in terms of responsible innovation. First thing, or first two things that are interconnected is more control to your process and also promote collaboration among teams. That's really very important. Also important, it brings customer needs to the center of the process. So customer needs really will stay and will have impact in your process that and in your framework that you intend to implement. Also important, when you combine Agile frameworks with idea of responsible innovation, is to bring, since the beginning of the process, the social, ethical, and environmental issues like impacts, risks, and opportunities to your process. So you bring them since the first moment. And of course, when combined, you can really promote a sustainable innovation. Okay, that's the point that I think it is really very important. More information about it, I recommend 3 publications in this field. First 2 are written by me and other colleagues. And the last, no, it's written by Lichtenstaller. First one is about large-scale Agile frameworks. Second one is about technology management. I like very much this second publication. Why? Because it is a case study that was implemented in African Internet Group. That is a very big company. It is the second biggest company in the field of IT in Africa. And it has also delegation in Portugal. And it's really interesting to know how knowledge management can be used in large scale teams. And the last one is how to combine Agile with the innovation process. Let's look about more information about them. First thing, the idea is to compare large Agile frameworks. Like I told, large-scale Agile are popular, but companies tend to implement a hybrid approach. So these publications intend to look to these large-scale Agile frameworks and compare them, considering some attributes. And the conclusion is there isn't a dominant large-scale Agile frameworks in all dimensions, but Nexus and Spotify offer typically low technical complexity that is adequate for smaller teams. Don't forget one thing, that here you are talking about large scale Agile, so small teams in context of large scale. And other frameworks give really high levels of scalability. That's good, of course, but you need to change your working process in your organization, what is not good. Okay, so typically when you want to start the large scale and you don't have so big teams, so Nexus and Spotify can be good solutions. Second publication is about the process of sharing and management of knowledge. And the conclusion is very interesting because if you consider person-level collaboration, team-level collaboration, and organization-level collaboration, you realize that the process of sharing and management knowledge is essentially addressed at the team level. Why? Because person can really implement some things interesting, but at team level, not easily. And organization level is not really easy. So team level is really very important to really put your process in the way, implementing management knowledge, for example, in Scrum. The big question of this publication was about scaling to multiple Scrum teams and consider 2 things, working locally and in the remote office. Why it is important? Theoretically, working locally and remote, it is almost the same thing. And COVID-19 realized that, almost that, so for all of us. However, it is not exactly the same thing, because when you work locally, it's not a question of interaction. It's a question of understanding the context. For example, I can give an interesting example that was applied in a African Internet group. One thing is to have a team in Porto, and the other thing is to have a team in Cairo. Why this create additional issue? Because the holidays in Portugal and holidays in Egypt is not exactly the same thing. So Monday morning or Monday to Wednesday that you are working and you are thinking that your team in Egypt is also working, but no, they are at home because it is an holiday. So you start to have some issues in terms of collaboration. Also, very important is the cultural component. For example, when you start to working with Muslims, there is an issue that is related with the place of human. So they don't like the idea and they don't admit, in fact, human leading to the process. So when you have a woman in your team that is Scrum Master or product owner, you can have an issue. So it is important to understand that cultural barriers can really have impact in your business process, okay, and implement them. So working locally and working remotely is not exactly the same thing. Don't forget the context that you are working. And of course, the output of this publication is about some practice that can be implemented in this organization. And the last one is a publication that is very interesting, that, that intends to create a framework that helps to integrate Agile innovation process, including sprints, lean startups, Scrum, and design thinking, interdisciplinary studies, or for example, for innovation. So it is very interesting because the idea is to create hybrid approach that really can be mapped and used in your organization. The great goal of this framework is to reduce development time and increase the success of new products. Okay, and I think for me it is okay. Let's move to Q&A, questions and answers, and I'm available to help and to answer some questions.
Thank you, Fernando. We have here some questions. I don't know if you'd like just to read them or if you'd like me to read. They're available in the Q&A section. They're a bit long, so maybe if you could take a look and read them, and then answer together or individually as you prefer.
Okay, I will work to, I will answer that. I have two questions in questions and answers. Am I right?
Yes, two questions, yes.
Okay, so I'm Marconi Pereira.
Yes.
So the question is, you shared that approach is more important than frameworks. Big companies like to have frameworks, tools, and so on, so they can align, collaborate, manage, and control. How do you solve this paradox of simplifying the process while you have the need to use tools and frameworks? So this is an interesting question because Marconi and some participants are assuming that that the tools are there and frameworks are there in the organization, but in fact, what is important to know is that the frameworks that can be adopted in a company are based in human. So they start something. Okay? There is a starting point in the process. So you don't need to have a framework that is very complex. So first thing to know and to consider is to put in question the frameworks that companies are using and really check if they are really creating value. If they are not creating value and only entropy to the process, so they are not good. So the idea is to simplify the frameworks and not really adopting a framework because the company is adopting and the company thinks that is producing good results. That's not the case, okay? So it is important to really adopt something that really creates value to the organization and not adopt the same work because it was adopted in the past. It doesn't make sense, okay? I hope it answered. Okay, let's move to the second question that was placed by Marconi. Also, the market is like an arena full of lions, competition. Companies are lacking more and more research, talent, money, time. When you implement the process of innovation in a company, at least in high level, what is your suggestion to focus on the pros, frameworks, or both? I think it is very important to focus in approach and not exactly in a framework. You need to know how you create value to the company. Okay, that's the most important thing. Framework should be aligned with that. You can create an hybrid framework. So that's really interesting. You can create a hybrid framework. And hybrid framework, it is important to know when I say hybrid, I'm not saying complex. Okay, typically hybrid is synonymous of complex. That's not the case. The idea to have an hybrid approach is to have something that makes sense to the company, something easy to adopt, and something that really creates value to the company. Okay, so it doesn't make sense you adopt a framework because others are adopting. In fact, if you look to the market, you realize one interesting thing. Most companies that are adopting, for example, large-scale Agile frameworks use hybrid. When you want to migrate a hybrid approach from one company to another, it doesn't work well. It is interesting that because in the same company, I can give the example of Deloitte, something that is implemented in Deloitte in Porto or Lisbon, it is not exactly give the same results in Copenhagen, that I have a lot of students, of my students working there. Why? Because the culture and the management team is not the same. So they don't have exactly the same mindset. Okay, so it is very important to really focus your approach on the approach and not exactly in the framework. Okay. I hope it was clear. More questions? More questions?
You have here one question on the Q&A. I don't know if you saw it.
No, but
Another
now,
one,
yes.
Yes.
Another question for Marconi.
Yes.
Do you any suggestion about the approach of education process, which I think you should focus first? Well, it is another interesting question. That Marconi suggests, for example, ideas, creativity. Well, ideas is very important, but like in the previous presentation, given by Ricky, ideas, there are context and the organizations and competitions, ideas competitions, that you can have thousands of ideas. And the big question is how to compare them. It makes sense to have 1,000 ideas, to have a lot of ideas. No, because the creativity is important, but the creativity without context is really nothing. It doesn't add value to the process. So you need to have ideas, of course, very important to have ideas, but to have context. Context is not the same thing as barriers, okay? So you don't need to limit the creativity, but you need to say that creativity is aligned what you want to propose. Because if I want to propose, for example, a new travel system, it doesn't make sense that I create something that is interesting for industrial markets or for other contexts. So it is very important the context where the ideas can appear. And creativity is also important because you don't have ideas, so don't have creativity. But the innovation process is start with ideas. Well, can start by ideas, but I can give a different approach. That is, look to the market, search, so have like a pull approach, and the ideas should be based in market needs and not exactly pure ideas. Okay, so it is important to look first to market and start to think in opposite way, considering also as most important the market needs. Okay. And one important thing, when you look to market needs, you need to think about what is important now, currently, at this date, but also important in the next 1 year, 2 years, 10 years. So market needs doesn't include only market current needs, but also tendencies in terms of market needs. Okay. Tendency in terms of behavior of customers. So it's very important to look at it also. Any more questions? Okay, I hope that everybody is really enjoying the presentations and seminars. I'm responsible for this course in terms of scientific terms. It is interesting to know that there are different kind of activities in terms of seminars, in terms of workshops. I would like to have more practical workshops. Let's be if it is possible. I will talk with Katarina about it, because the last seminar that some of them will attend, of course, others not. It is a choice of each person. But it is important. The last seminar that I will organize, the idea is to create a business case to responsible innovation. So it would be relevant if everybody can create really a business case, okay, and not only present something that is already done. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Fernando. We appreciate your suggestion, and I'm sure the participants will gladly receive information if we are able to organize such a webinar or such a seminar. And we thank you very much for your presence and for your workshop today. I believe everybody was clear about the subject. Let me just say this seminar was recorded, is being recorded, so it will be available on the UT Austin Portugal program YouTube page, but you'll be noticed when that happens. So just to answer Marconi question, and the presentation, if Professor allows, will be delivered to all participants in the seminar after the whole workshop at the end of the whole session. Okay. So for now, I would like, yes. So
okay,
you want
okay for me
to say something else, Professor?
No.
Okay. So we thank everybody
clear.
for your presence. Thank you very much, and we'll be ending this session to start the next one. So we thank you very much for your presence, and have a nice afternoon. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Everything okay to all. Bye.
Bye-bye.
And see you Friday.
See you. Bye-bye.